You join me here today halfway through the first ZRL race of the 2023 winter season on Scotland's rolling Highlands loop. It's quite an undulating circuit. It doesn't contain any sort of really long climbs, but the road is rarely flat. We're taking on 3 laps of this circuit today, and unusually for a ZRL race, this isn't actually a points race. It's a sort of a standard scratch race format where all points will count purely on your finishing line position. The finishing line is at the top of the Breakaway Brae KOM. It isn't a particularly long or steep climb. It's I think 600 metres long, and it only averages a few percent. But there are a couple of sort of steeper pitches sort of in the middle section where it does very briefly get up to sort of 6 or 7%. Like I said at the start, there are no points available on that segment today. And throughout the first lap, or the first couple of laps, my plan has just been to do enough power, work hard enough to maintain a good pack position. But there is no need at all on that KOM section to be pushing too hard and kind of wasting too much energy. As really all we need to do is just sit in the pack and keep everything really for the final sprint. The first lap and a half have gone by at a relatively steady pace. There's been no major breakaway attacks. I mean, just as I'm saying that here, you can see there is one rider who has just got off the front of the group. But even with the new 4.1 pack dynamics, where a lot of races are now being decided by a breakaway, I think a single rider really isn't something for a group of this size to be too concerned with. My own personal strategy today has been, in an ideal world, I was aiming to actually sit in the group, do as little work as possible throughout the race, and I wanted to see if I could hit out early at the bottom of our final time up the Breakaway Brae, so with sort of 600-700 metres left. I was looking to try and hit out really early there, try and gap the field, and hopefully, fingers crossed, try and stay away to kind of take the victory. This is something that I've used previously quite successfully. I used it in the first season of ZRL, where we finished up the Richmond, the Libby Hill KOM. I managed to actually kind of hit out early from the base of the climb, stay away from the main pack, and take victory on that day. And I was kind of hoping that maybe with this short KOM finish, in a similar vein to something like the course in Richmond, that same tactic might actually prove an effective one. I mean, I was acutely aware, however, that type of tactic of kind of really hitting out early at the base of a finishing climb, or going long or super long on any finish for that matter, is really very much kind of an all or nothing technique. You'll tend to find that you'll either take the win, or you'll make a complete hash of it, get swallowed up by the group, and finish somewhere out the back. It's very rare that it's kind of you do it and still finish in the top few positions. So it was potentially risky, but it was something that I wanted to try on this finish. As you can see here, we just hit in, this is the second lap, just hitting that kind of castle, that corkscrew climb. I did need to hit, I think, mid 600 watts there to maintain position in the group. You can see I'm kind of maybe around 20th, 25th position. I didn't want to go, as I said earlier, with the Breakaway Brae. I don't want to go too close to the front. I want to be far enough towards the front that if any gaps happen, if anyone is kind of struggling and they lose the wheel and gaps form in the group, as you can see on my mini map up there are a few small groups forming in that pack. I want to make sure I'm the right side of those, so I probably want to stay in the front third of the pack heading up the climb, but I don't really want to be on the front. It did take quite a hard effort. I see my heart rate got up to over 190 there during that push. So it wasn't an easy effort by any stretch. But as soon as we kind of crested that corkscrew climb and was heading down the other side, I was able to just back off the power slightly and try and recover in the group. The punishment sort of comes in hard again fast here on this course, because after that very short descent, you cross the bridge here, hang a left, and you pretty much immediately drop onto the breakaway Bray climb. I mean, thankfully, during this first race of the ZRL season, there are no points available for this segment. But again, it's just a case of that modulating that power, making sure that you stay in the group, because you don't want to get dropped off. You don't want to be hanging out the back. So even though there are no points available at the top, at the finish, the effort, there'll still be quite a significant effort to make sure that you can hang with the front of the pack. My own personal preference at a feature such as this is to usually try and stay quite close towards the front. Again, not on the front. You don't want to be wasting power. You don't want to be needlessly working hard on the front when you could have an easier ride sat in the draft behind someone. But I normally like to kind of stay towards the front and just give myself a little bit of that sliding room. I'd like to know that I've got over it, over the feature or over the climb, like towards the front, as you can see myself here. Just know that I am there, and then I can very, very quickly back off the power. I mean, I need to back off as 195 heart rate there. Very hard effort. I can back off and just kind of allow myself to be re-swallowed up in the group there. I thought I'd then use that opportunity to quickly slug a gel. I did exactly the same after the finish of the first lap. Took in a quick gel just on this slightly easier section down the bit of the descent there. Get a gel in just to make sure that I am sort of primed up for the finish. I was hoping that this middle section, we've got a couple of kilometres now after the two climbs where it does gradually sort of descend. There's little ramps down before we kind of get into those the rolling hill section. That sort of leads us through the middle part of this route. Just trying to use some of these sections. Just you can see one coming up here where we go to a negative gradient, just backing off the power and actually just trying to stretch the legs out a little bit. Just stretch them out. The hamstrings starting to feel a little bit tight, but just using those opportunities as you go down a little bit of a hill. Not as easy these days as it used to be, now that things like the super tuck, etc. has gone from when you're in a group. But still, you can just, on those downhill sections, you can ease off the power, just stretch out the legs a little bit, and just try and sort of get a bit more life into you, really. So after the first two laps, and as we head into the final lap of our race here, our lead group has gone from, we start with 82 riders. I think we're down to around 35, 36 riders at this point. So it's still a significant sized groups, around half the field. Some very, very strong riders in here. There's a couple of riders that have got a Swift Power ranking of under 100. We are Division 1, so of our time zone. So it is a strong raced field. Mr. Eric Schlange himself for Zwift Insider is part of this group. Obviously his team has ended up in the same league as us. So I look forward to reading. I'm sure he'll be putting out a few of the race reviews, how the race was lost, maybe how the race was won. Articles on Zwift Insider over the coming season. We in the Kirchmair team, we have got 5 riders still in the front group. We did unfortunately only start the race with 5. The ZRL racing is a full team, is a team of 6. We didn't quite fill that team today, unfortunately. We did only start with 5 riders, but luckily all 5 of us are still in this front pack, giving us, hopefully quite a good chance of a good points haul come the finish line. Thankfully, the group has really backed off the pace. My heart rate is dropping down nice and low. It's down the low 170s now, which is quite low for me. I've got a frighteningly high heart rate. It's not uncommon for it to stay well over 180 during a Zwift race, to average over 180. So for myself, that's coming down quite nicely now. Nice bit of recovery. The group has really backed off the pace here. We've had very few attacks throughout the race. We've got 6.3 kilometers left until we get to that finish line. But we are yet to really enter a really tough section of the race. I was thinking before the start that riders are going to be trying to take advantage. You're kind of almost the non-sprinter type riders are trying to take advantage, I've found, in Zwift racing these days with the new 4.1 pack draft dynamics of trying to actually break away early. And this course, with the rollers that will be starting in about a kilometre and a half's time, the roll-in climb then, if we want to call it that, I was suspecting a lot of attacks were going to start. And again, that Castle Corkscrew climb was something that I was kind of a little bit apprehensive of. I felt that there could be some really strong attacks there, and it might be hard to actually hold on. Just as I'm saying that, as you can see, there was a message, Go Felix, popped up in the chat, and there is a rider, presumably Felix, is on the front and has started drilling it here just before, a little bit early than what I anticipated, but just before we enter into that roll-in section. The pack is now really strung out. When it was moving a little bit slower, when people weren't riding as hard, if you noticed, the actual pack of riders was quite short but quite wide, spread across the road, much in the same vein as that you'd get in a real life road race, such as something in the Tour de France. Here, it was actually it has come a bit together here. I think that they backed off the pace at this point, and it has started to compact again. But if you notice, the actual group ended up a lot longer and a lot thinner, which is always a sign that there's people on the front riding quite hard. It has taken quite an effort to go. I mean, I was quite enjoying the fact that my heart rate had dropped down into sort of like the zone 3. It's now back up in the 190s. We've really been on the gas here for a few minutes by this point, for a couple of K now. And I'm just sort of, I remember thinking to myself during the race that the legs are not feeling good. I am questioning. I remember questioning at this point whether it was actually something I was going to be able to hang on to until the end. I'm currently sitting in sort of 28th place. There weren't many riders left behind me, so I knew that I had to sort of dig deep, hold on, and because I couldn't afford to drop back really. There wasn't a long tail of riders that were going to sweep me up at that point. Thankfully, as we've kind of we're coming through these castle arches here, you can see my power's back down into sort of the mid 200s, mid to low 200s. The group has really backed off the pace here. Thankfully, for myself, I was quite glad of that. The heart rate is starting to drop down. It won't drop down too much more at this point. I mean, late into the race, it's been quite unseasonably warm, I should say, in South Wales as well. My Pain Cave, I've got some really good fans. I can get the doors open. But I think during this race, the actual outside temperature was not far off 30 degrees, which is, I suppose, quite unusual for this time of September. But it was warm. I think we are 40 minutes into a race, and the heart rate really was probably going to struggle to come down now with the heat. I was then cursing at this point. I could see another attack has gone. Another rider's going off the front, and I thought this could be me. But I did know that just after this roundabout, there was a flatter section and then a slight downhill. So I felt that if I was able just to dig in, at this point I was saying to myself, I've got to dig in here and close this gap. If I let it go any bigger, that's it, I'm dropped. So I managed to find an extra bit of motivation just to close that gap, knowing that we did have a slight downhill coming up. When I got here, I realised it was actually my teammate, Martin Eichem. from the Kirchmair team who's attacked off the front. So I was a bit happy about that, knowing it was someone from my team who was actually trying to go. And it also then meant that I wouldn't need to contribute in any way to any sort of chase. I could sit in the group, get the maximum benefit of the draft, and hopefully he'd stay away, and then the rest of us would be able to sort of to race for the other positions from behind. We'll see whether he stays away. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, but we'll get to it in due time. There's a short descent here now that comes up just before the Corkscrew Castle climb. Trying to enjoy that, trying to use the least amount of power possible to just stay in that draft. I have a feather power up. I don't want to use it on this climb. I want to save it for the finish. I could use it on the climb to make it, to try and help, make it a little bit easier to get up it. But I sort of felt that if I had to do that, then I was never going to be able to compete at the finish anyway. So I might as well just hold it for the finish and dig deep to get up this little corkscrew climb. The ZRL races this season are giving riders all the same power-ups at set banners. So for this race we had the feather that you can see that I've kept hold of, that we were picking up at the banner that is midway on this Rolling Highlands loop. And we were also given the breakaway burrito at the top of the KOM. Both power-ups can be useful in the right circumstances, but I sort of felt that maybe a feather might be a little bit more useful come that sort of final. Unfortunately here we do just sweep up Martin. He was just caught. I mean, I remember us talking after the race, and I think that if he was able to kind of have stayed away for maybe just another 20 or 30 seconds, and he could have headed down the descent the other side here, he might have had more of a chance in actually staying away. I think he got caught just at the wrong time for him, just on the crest of that climb, and he did. He went straight through the group and out the back. Really brilliant effort for him. He said himself before the start that he hasn't quite got the legs. He's had a little bit of a break from riding recently, but he really did put in a super effort, particularly after an early dropout that he had, and he fought to get back on the front group. Okay, so we're at the point here now. The front group, it has stretched slightly, but has now slowed and has come back together. I'm trying my best to get my heart rate down by using basically the least amount of power that I possibly can at this point, just to stay in the group. We're about to turn left, and I've decided that yes, I am still going to go with my original plan. I still do want to try and hit out early. We take a left just before the start of the breakaway bray, and we have 800 metres left. There's a very short section here where it does reach a few percent in gradient, and that's where I was planning to start the attack. I dropped my feather power up with 650 metres to go. Initially hit out standing, dropped into the saddle, and then stood again just as it hits the steepest part of this climb. It just gets up to just about 7% here. It was then just a case of trying to hold on, really, keep the power as high as I could. I was briefly joined on my rear wheel. I seen Michael Colros, my teammate, and I had great visions of us both staying away over the finish line. I was then swallowed up. 100 metres left to go, and the group comes surging past me, and I was completely and utterly empty. I mean, my heart rate's got up to 209 there, and that effort really, really took it out to me. It wasn't a total disaster. I mean, I've managed to finish in 11th, but I just did not have the legs to pull that off there today. I think in hindsight, looking back, what I could have done better, I perhaps could have gone a bit harder, a bit earlier. Instead of trying to pace the effort, perhaps I should have really hit out hard, almost with a max sprint, and then just kind of hang on for as long as I could. I don't actually think, again in hindsight, that the finishing climb is steep enough to really kind of create that separation in the group like you'd get on Richmond, for example, finishing up Libby Hill, and it's a little bit flatter, so it does kind of almost lend itself a bit more to a normal sprint. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you for ZRL Week 2.